They say you should never share your best ideas too soon, but when you're the youngest developer on a team that barely remembers your name, sometimes the only way to be seen is to shine a little too brightly. My name is Jessica Tran. I'm 27 years old, and until last month, I was a junior software developer at a mid-sized tech company called Hensley Innovations in San Diego. The kind of place with beanbags in the lobby, kombucha on tap, and a ceiling made of reinforced glass. I didn't come from Stanford or MIT. I came from night classes at a community college, building code between waitressing shifts. I got hired because I was cheap, fast, and didn't ask for much. For the first 6 months, I worked in silence, shipped bug fixes, and kept my ideas in a notebook I never let out of my sight. Until one day, I slipped. It was during a brainstorming meeting. Our team was struggling with a project called VibeLink, an internal experiment aimed at connecting creators with audiences through AI-driven interest mapping. The client was on edge, and our lead dev had just resigned. Our manager, Darren, was panicking. He turned to the room and said, "Anyone got anything?" I hesitated. Then I opened my notebook. I pitched an app interface that would integrate with existing social APIs, learn user habits passively, and serve content creators with tailored audience analytics in real time. I'd been working on it quietly for 6 months on weekends, refining every line. Darren looked up from his laptop for the first time all meeting. "That's not bad," he muttered. By the end of the day, he'd asked me to send over my notes. I should have known. What followed was 3 weeks of vague meetings I wasn't invited to. A team of senior devs pulled from other projects. My design sketches disappeared from my desk. Darren barely spoke to me unless it was to ask for a quick clarification. And then came the email. "Team," it read, "I'm excited to announce that VibeLink has been selected as a finalist for the Future Tech Innovation Award. This project wouldn't exist without the visionary leadership of Darren Klein. Let's celebrate his brilliance." I stared at the screen, unable to blink. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. At the awards dinner, Darren wore a navy suit and the same smug smile he used when taking credit for someone else's work. When he stood on stage, holding the glass trophy like he'd forged it with his bare hands, he said, "Innovation is about listening to the future. And sometimes the best ideas are born when leadership gives them room to grow." I clapped, quietly, with everyone else. After the ceremony, he found me near the exit. "You're young, Jess," he said, patting my shoulder like a friendly uncle. "You'll get your chance. Someday." I just smiled and said, "Of course." But what he didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that 3 months earlier I'd filed for a provisional patent. Quietly, under my own name, on my own time. I hadn't expected to need it. I was just trying to protect something I'd poured my soul into. But now it was insurance. I didn't go nuclear. Not yet. I went home that night and watched the award speech replay on the company's social feed. It had already racked up over 12,000 views. Clients were reaching out. Tech blogs were writing glowing articles about Darren's vision. And I sat in the dark, laptop open, fingers hovering over a folder labeled "Full Documentation, Patent Proof." I wasn't angry. Not in the loud, throwing things kind of way. I was hollow, like a ghost watching someone else live the life I'd built. Then my phone buzzed. It was my best friend Maya, who worked in IP law. Saw the announcement. "Is this the one you told me about? The patent app you filed in April?" "Yes." "You know what this means, right?" "Yeah," I wrote back. "I do, because Darren didn't just steal my idea. He'd stolen something that didn't legally belong to him. And that's where the unraveling would begin." It's strange how the smallest moments change everything. The morning after the award ceremony, I showed up to work at 8:03 a.m., coffee in one hand, badge in the other. Darren walked past me in the hallway, still high off the spotlight. "Morning, Jess," he said, without even looking, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't watched him stand on a stage and collect praise for the idea I'd sketched on a paper napkin at a diner 6 months earlier. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the internal product files. I scrolled through the recent edits. The framework, the code structure, the UI sequence, even the AI logic flow. It was all mine. Just rewritten in a different voice. A few variables renamed. A few functions reshaped. But the bones were unmistakable. And yet, in the metadata, the author listed was Darren. Of course. I took a slow breath and plugged in my external drive. Backups of every draft, sketch, and git commit from my private repository. Date stamped, versioned. I documented it all. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I'm the kind of person who always keeps receipts. That morning, Maya called. I talked to a partner at my firm. She said, "We have a potential infringement case. Your provisional patent holds weight, especially if the published work bears substantial similarity." I didn't sign anything when I joined, I told her, pacing in the stairwell. No IP clause about side projects. She was quiet for a beat. "Jess, you might be holding a grenade. The question is, when do you pull the pin?" I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I did what I'd always done. I worked. I kept my head down and documented everything. Every change in the codebase. Every file that appeared in internal documentation with Darren's name on it. I created a mirrored timeline of development, matching my original proposal against the company's published work. At home, I barely slept. My stomach was a fist of knots. Not from fear, from injustice. Because the longer I stayed silent, the more I watched my idea be paraded around like someone else's trophy. The final straw came 2 weeks later. A press release. Hensley Innovations announces strategic partnership with Quantum Collective using groundbreaking tech from VibeLink platform. The contract was rumored to be worth 7 figures. Darren's name was quoted in every article. Visionary, trailblazer, the face of innovation. I read it 3 times, then stared at the ceiling of my studio apartment, blinking back tears. Then I sent the email. Subject, intellectual property dispute. VibeLink framework to legal@hensleyinnovations.com. CC, Maya Patel, legal counsel, myself. Message, I am writing to inform you of a pending intellectual property conflict regarding the core architecture and concept behind the VibeLink platform, which was originally developed, documented, and provisionally patented by me under the USPTO filing number 83723-P. Attached are copies of my original development logs, dated prototypes, and submission confirmations. Please treat this as an official notice of ownership claim and potential infringement. Jessica Tran. It felt surreal, like hitting send on a letter you've written 100 times in your head but never thought you'd actually mail. By noon, my badge access was suspended. HR called within the hour. "This is a misunderstanding," they said carefully. "We'd like to discuss it internally before you make any formal statements." Too late, because Maya had already looped in a tech publication contact. Not a story, not yet, just a quiet inquiry. But it was enough to make the wheels start turning. By the next morning, word had leaked. TechChain Weekly ran a headline. Anonymous developer claims patent theft behind award-winning app. Anonymous. For now, but not for long. That afternoon, I got a text from Darren. "You've made your point. Let's talk." No lawyers. I didn't respond. Because it was already too late for friendly negotiations. He had underestimated me. Believed his title protected him. That I'd stay silent, grateful for proximity to power. But I didn't want proximity anymore. I wanted credit. I wanted truth. And now I had it. And soon everyone else would too. By Friday morning, everything had changed. What started as a quiet claim had become something louder, messier, real. Maya called me before I'd even had coffee. "It's live," she said. "What is?" Tech Radar picked it up. They ran a follow-up on the anonymous developer claim. But this time, they used your name. I pulled the article up on my phone. There it was. My name in bold. Jessica Tran, former junior developer at Hensley Innovations, alleges her idea was stolen and used without credit. Patent filing dates back over 3 months before the award-winning launch of VibeLink. Underneath that, a screenshot of my original concept sketch, the one I'd drawn during a late-night shift at that all-night diner stained with coffee and dreams. They'd even found the patent filing. My hands were shaking. I should have felt fear. Regret? Something. But instead, I felt steady. Finally. At noon, my inbox exploded. Some emails were supportive. Former coworkers, classmates, even strangers who said things like, "Your courage just gave me mine." Others weren't so kind. Anonymous accounts calling me ungrateful, attention-seeking, jealous. But the worst one came from Darren. Subject: "You're ruining everything. I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, Jess. But it's not too late to stop. Take it down, walk away quietly, and we can figure something out. I can talk to the board. This doesn't have to get uglier than it already is." He still thought this was a negotiation. Still thought I wanted a seat at a table that had already burned me. I didn't reply. Instead, Maya and I set a meeting with her firm's IP litigation team. They were interested. Very interested. Because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about setting a precedent. A message to companies that ideas aren't free just because they come from someone without a title. That weekend, I left the city. I drove up to my aunt's cabin in Big Bear Lake. No cell reception, no Wi-Fi. Just time. I sat by the fire and tried to remember what life had felt like before the betrayal. Before I'd watched someone else wear my work like a tailored suit. Before I'd learned how easily people rewrite history if you don't speak up. When I got back on Monday morning, I had 92 unread emails. The first was from Hensley Innovations' legal team. "We have received your complaint and are conducting an internal review. In the meantime, we request that you refrain from making any additional public statements until the matter is resolved." The second was from a journalist at Founders Digest. "We'd like to profile your story, not just the legal battle, but your voice, the creator behind the idea. Are you open to an interview?" Maya advised caution. "If this goes to trial, every word will be scrutinized." But I was done hiding. I agreed. The interview was honest, emotional. I didn't attack anyone. I didn't throw accusations. I just told the truth. How I'd worked on VibeLink long before Hensley ever knew it existed. How I'd trusted someone who saw me as a tool, not a creator. How I'd filed the patent quietly, not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation. And most importantly, how women in tech are often told to be grateful, to wait their turn, to not make noise. But sometimes, noise is the only language power understands. 2 days later, the article dropped. Not just a seat at the table, how Jessica Tran fought back against IP theft in tech. It went viral in under 24 hours, LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, everywhere. And then the thing no one expected happened. An email from Quantum Collective, the partner named in the press release. The company who had just signed the 7-figure deal. Subject: urgent, VibeLink partnership review. "Jessica, I read your story. I've also reviewed your patent filing. I want you to know, we were never made aware of this situation. We're pausing the deal with Hensley immediately while we conduct our own due diligence. If your claims are valid, and frankly they appear to be, we won't move forward. Sincerely, Grant Murdoch, President, Quantum Collective." I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Maya. Her reply came in all caps. "They're bleeding." The truth wasn't just out there. It was working. And Hensley was finally starting to feel the consequences. But this was only the beginning. The real storm hadn't even started yet. 3 days after the Quantum Collective deal was paused, the silence from Hensley became deafening. No press statement. No denial. Just nothing. Except internally, something was boiling. I knew it. Because on Thursday morning, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Alex Rowe, a senior software engineer at Hensley, and someone who had once helped me debug a broken UI element after everyone else left for drinks. "Jess, I don't know if this helps, but I've seen your name removed from commit logs before. I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to get involved. But what they did to you? That wasn't just unethical. It was intentional. If you need someone to back you up, I'm here. I stared at the screen. My stomach twisted. Not with surprise, but confirmation. What I'd suspected all along was true. This wasn't just Darren going rogue. It was systemic. Maya and her team took that message and folded it into the case file, along with the Git history, the UI sketches, the emails, the version control timelines. We had built a wall of receipts, tall, solid, and irrefutable. The next day, it cracked wide open. Someone leaked internal emails to the press. Real emails, screenshots. One was from Darren to the CTO. We should scrub early devlogs. Can't afford a trail right now. Another read. If Tran pushes this, we'll call it a team collaboration. Who's going to believe a junior anyway? I read those words again and again, like I was trying to force them into something less disgusting. But there it was, in writing. Erasure. Documented. It wasn't just me anymore. It was every junior employee who had ever had their ideas harvested and dismissed. Every "you'll get your turn" whispered over stolen brilliance. That night, a new hashtag started trending. Credit the creator. By the weekend, 3 more people from Hensley had reached out, 2 from marketing, 1 from HR, all with the same message. We saw it too. We were told to stay quiet. Maya called me that Sunday afternoon. Her voice was clipped, energized. They're scared. They should be. She paused. They're offering a settlement. I stopped mid-step in my apartment. Already? They want to resolve this quietly. Financial compensation, a confidentiality clause, and a formal retraction from you. I almost laughed. They wanted my silence more than they wanted justice. How much? I asked. Not because I cared about the number, but because I wanted to know how little they thought the truth was worth. 7 figures, she said. It's generous, but it comes with a muzzle. I finished. Exactly. I didn't need to think. I'd already made the decision weeks ago, sitting in the dark after the award ceremony. When they took my idea, they took something personal. But when they tried to erase me completely, they declared war. No, I said. We take it to court. Maya didn't flinch. Then we go public with the full documentation next week and file the formal suit by Friday. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. My heart beat like a war drum, but my voice stayed calm. Let's do it. That night, I pulled up my old prototype. The original code. It still ran. Simple, rough around the edges, but fully functional. My fingerprint was everywhere, from the data flow to the risk analysis logic. I stared at it for a long time. Then I added a title screen, created by Jessica Tran. Nothing flashy, just true. By Monday, the story hit Wired. Startup giant faces, legal battle over stolen IP. Junior developer files lawsuit with receipts. Attached were snippets of the leaked emails, side-by-side code comparisons, and a quote from me. This isn't just about one app. It's about every unseen hand that makes innovation possible. And it's time those hands were named. Suddenly, people started listening. My inbox filled with interviews, podcast requests, messages from developers across the world, many of them women, first-gen grads, or immigrants like me. I didn't think I could speak up until I saw you did. Your story is my story. Different company, same theft. We see you, we're behind you. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. Hensley tried to issue a statement. It was hollow, full of vague phrases like unintended oversight, respect for innovation, and moving forward with transparency. But it was too late for damage control, because now it was in the hands of the court. And more importantly, of the public. Darren had stolen my work, but now I was taking back my name. Not for revenge, for recognition, and for everyone who'd ever been told they were just lucky to be in the room. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No dramatic wood-paneled ceilings, no echoing chambers, just pale walls, quiet tension, and a judge who barely looked up as we began. It had been nearly 8 months since I'd sent that first email. Since Darren stood on stage holding a trophy he didn't earn. Since I'd smiled through gritted teeth while being erased in real time. Now, everything was in the open. Emails, Git logs, test versions, witness statements, internal memos, the original prototype, the patent filing date, the interview clips, the screenshots. Every piece of it meticulously laid out by Maya and her team like chess moves leading to an inevitable checkmate. And yet, Hensley still tried to fight. They framed it as collaborative development, claimed my idea emerged organically through team discussions, claimed I had agreed to contribute without expecting recognition. And Darren, sitting there in his expensive tailored suit, still looked like he believed he could talk his way out of it. He took the stand on day 3. He called me a promising young talent. He smiled, softened his voice, leaned into the performative humility. "I always believed in Jessica," he said. "I just think there was a misunderstanding. She was part of a team. Innovation doesn't belong to one person." And that's when Maya stood. Permission to introduce Exhibit 42? It was a video clip. Internal screen recording from Hensley's Slack workspace. A message from Darren. "She's not ready for credit. Let's be strategic. Keep her name off the press materials, at least until after we lock the funding." The silence that followed was thunderous. The judge looked up for the first time. "We'll resume tomorrow," he said, and banged the gavel. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered. I kept my sunglasses on and said nothing. Maya answered all the questions. She was the composed one, the shield. I was the story, but she made sure I never became the spectacle. The verdict came 2 weeks later, ruling in favor of the plaintiff, Jessica Tran. The judgment included damages, legal fees, and most importantly, a formal order of correction for authorship and ownership of the VibeLink platform, including the public retraction of Darren's award and recognition of me as the original inventor. I didn't cry. I thought I would. But the moment the ruling was read, I just breathed. For the first time in almost a year, I let my shoulders drop. It was over, but also just beginning. The fallout was swift. Hensley's stock dropped 18% in 3 days. Their upcoming product launch was canceled. Darren was placed on indefinite administrative leave, which became permanent 2 weeks later. The board issued a groveling statement full of promises about ethics reviews and updated internal culture protocols. It wasn't enough to fix what they broke, but it was a start. Meanwhile, the tech world kept talking. Podcasts, panels, roundtables. Jessica Tran became a name people knew, not because I was flashy, but because I had dared to speak while others whispered. I got calls from investors, from incubators, from 3 different universities asking me to guest lecture on innovation ethics. But the message that meant the most came in the form of a handwritten note delivered to Maya's office. No return address, just a single line. "Thank you for showing us we're allowed to fight back." I taped it to the wall above my desk. 6 months later, I launched my own firm, Signal North, a startup consultancy focused on ethical innovation, diverse teams, and intellectual property protection. We don't just build tech. We build futures no one gets to steal. Some of my former coworkers joined. Others sent their resumes quietly. And every time we reviewed a new pitch, I asked one question. Who really made this? Because I never wanted anyone else to sit where I had. Silenced. Overlooked. Watching someone else collect the reward for their labor. The award Darren accepted? It was retracted publicly. And while he tried to return to the spotlight through a podcast, rebranding, no one was listening anymore. You can only steal brilliance for so long before people stop believing you ever had any. Last week, I took the stage at a national tech conference, the same one that once applauded Darren's name. Only this time, the spotlight was on me. I looked out at the crowd. Young developers, founders, engineers, mostly women, mostly people who had been told they were too junior or not leadership material. And I said this. They called me lucky to be in the room, but luck didn't write that code. Luck didn't design that system. I did. And I almost walked away because I thought no one would believe me. But silence is not a requirement for success. You don't have to disappear to move forward. You can speak, you can fight, and you can win. Afterward, a girl, maybe 19, barely old enough to vote, came up to me with a tear in her eye. "I'm studying computer science," she said. And every professor says the same thing. Get used to people taking credit. That's just how it works. I smiled. It's how it used to work. I knew something was off the moment Lucas called me into his office with that forced corporate cheerfulness, the kind that usually precedes either a team-building retreat or a layoff. "Ashley," he said, grinning like a politician in election week. "We've got a new intern joining us, just fresh from Columbia. Finance whiz, apparently. You two will be a great team." Right. Like a shark and a seal are a great team. I'd been working in payroll compliance for 7 years. Built the current system from scratch. Not sexy work, but clean. Precise. Bulletproof. And now I was supposed to train the intern? Sure, I've seen this move before. It's not mentoring. It's replacement with a smile. Still, I played along. "Happy to help," I said, matching his fake cheer with something dangerously close to sarcasm. The intern's name was Brian. Bright-eyed, overdressed, and way too confident for someone who still had his school ID in his wallet. He bounced into the room like he thought it was a TED Talk, shook my hand too hard, and said, "Looking forward to learning everything you do." "I bet you are." We started slow. I walked him through vendor routing and automated audits. He nodded like he understood, but typed like a raccoon on Red Bull. Every 5 minutes, another question. Every 10, another suggestion. "Why don't we just switch to a plug-and-play API? Can't we automate the approval flow using AI? I smiled. Patient. Helpful. Inside, I was screaming. You don't automate nuance. You don't AI integrity. Lucas kept hovering near our desks like a helicopter parent with a severance package in his pocket. "Everything good?" he'd ask, pretending to sip coffee he never drank. "Great," I'd reply, without looking up. He's learning fast. What I didn't say, he's watching faster, because Brian already knew too much. He asked about systems I hadn't shown him yet. Clicked through folders he shouldn't have had access to. And one morning, I caught him flipping through archived bonus memos like he was studying for a pop quiz I never gave. Still, I said nothing. Just logged everything. Quiet. Professional. Careful. And then came the lunch meeting. Lucas insisted I join him and the regional CEO, Mr. Zhang, along with Brian, as a bonding exercise. I should have known. The restaurant was one of those sleek places downtown with soft jazz, tiny plates, and prices that assume you never check your bank account. Polished floors, glass walls, chopsticks preset. I sat across from Lucas, Brian to my right, Mr. Zhang beside him. Lucas ordered fast. Knew the menu. Too eager. Brian nodded along like a ventriloquist's dummy. Then Lucas leaned in toward Mr. Zhang and said something, low and fast in Mandarin. I caught every syllable. She doesn't know we'll fire her after this. Pity, she looks like she works hard. My chopsticks froze midair. Lucas chuckled, pleased with himself. Mr. Zhang didn't laugh, just nodded politely. Brian gave a confused smile, clearly missing the punchline. And I? I blinked once, set my chopsticks down, reached for my tea. Because what Lucas didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had lived in Hangzhou for 5 years, finished my graduate degree at Zhejiang University, read, wrote, and spoke Mandarin like I was born to it. I had filed pension audits in Chinese more complex than anything Lucas could manage in English. But more importantly, I knew when someone was digging my grave and smiling while they did it. I said nothing. Not then. Just sipped my tea and filed his words away like evidence in a sealed folder. Because that moment wasn't the betrayal. It was the confirmation. The betrayal had started months ago, when Lucas cut my team budget with no explanation, reassigned key accounts to younger employees, and suddenly started CCing Brian on sensitive emails with subject lines like transition planning. They weren't grooming Brian to help me. They were grooming him to replace me. But Lucas made one mistake. He thought language was a wall. He didn't realize it was my weapon. And now? Now I wasn't documenting to save myself. I was documenting to bury him. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about principle. About the silent workers who keep the wheels turning while others take the credit. About the quiet women in meetings whose names never make the slide deck. And most of all, this was about timing. And mine was just getting started. The day after that lunch, something shifted. Not in them. In me. Lucas strolled past my desk like nothing had happened, tapping his coffee cup and saying, "Ashley, can you forward Brian those compliance logs from Q1? He's eager to dive deeper." Deeper, huh? I smiled without showing teeth. Of course, I'll clean them up first. I didn't mean sanitize, I meant set the trap. I opened a new folder on my private drive and labeled it, Stage 1, Watch Them Hang Themselves. Inside it, copies of the logs with specific rows labeled in Mandarin. Nothing too suspicious, just enough to seem like leftover notes from an old audit. Because here's the thing. If Lucas or Brian actually understood what they were reading, they'd know those labels didn't belong to Q1. They belonged to a confidential internal investigation we ran back in 2021. A test file, meaning Brian had no business touching it. I didn't have to bait him, just leave breadcrumbs. Sure enough, an hour later, I saw the file open on the shared server, then again in the system access log. Brian had copied it to his desktop. Perfect. Meanwhile, Lucas sent me a message on Slack, casual tone barely masking the push. Quick heads up, I'm bringing Brian to next week's compliance meeting. Think it's time he gets exposure to real-time oversight. Exposure, that's what they called it now. I typed back, great initiative. I'll prep him with context beforehand. Translation? I'll feed him just enough information to get him caught. That week, I started mislabeling low-priority folders, renamed archived training decks with legal-sounding acronyms, changed column headings from vendor contact to VC attestation. Normal enough to overlook, strange enough to trip anyone pretending to know what they were doing. And Brian tripped. Hard. In the Thursday meeting, when the head of legal asked about our latest vendor onboarding batch, Brian jumped in confidently. "Well," he said, scanning his tablet, "according to the VC attestation index, all entries meet the FTL thresholds for Q2. The room went still. FTL? That wasn't a threshold. It was a placeholder I made up during testing. Fake term limit. I used it once. In 2019. As a joke. Lucas blinked. The head of legal cocked her head. "What threshold exactly does FTL measure?" Brian stammered. Vendor authorization to, invoice limits?" She smiled politely. "There is no such term in our system." Brian looked at Lucas. Lucas looked at me. I kept a straight face and took a sip of coffee. That should have been the wake-up call. But Lucas wasn't someone who backed off. He was the kind of guy who doubled down, sure he could talk his way out of anything. Or at least blame his way out of it. The next morning, I caught a whiff of desperation. He called me into a side room, that fake concerned expression stretched thin on his face. Hey, Ashley. Just wanted to check in. You've been a bit quiet lately. Everything good? I nodded. Very good. Just focusing. He leaned in like he was about to offer me stock tips. You know, Brian's rough around the edges, but he's sharp. Give him space to grow, okay? You've got a lot of institutional memory. Just don't make it too hard to follow. Translation: dumb it down for the boy genius so he can steal it faster. I tilted my head. Of course, I'll make things easier. He smiled, satisfied, and walked out like he'd won something. But I'd already won. Because earlier that morning, I'd added a silent listener to our document approval platform. Every file Brian touched would now forward an auto notification to a folder shared with our overseas audit team. And remember Mr. Zhang, the regional CEO from lunch? Yeah, I hadn't forgotten him either. He hadn't laughed at Lucas's joke, hadn't encouraged it, just nodded, stoic, unreadable. But when I'd passed him in the hallway the following Monday, I gave him the smallest bow and said softly in Mandarin, "Thank you for the lunch meeting. I learned a lot." He froze for half a second. Then he smiled. Not wide, not warm, but sharp, knowing. He knew I'd understood everything, and from that moment, I wasn't invisible anymore. That's when the pieces really began to shift. Because while Lucas was busy bragging about succession strategy and private calls, and Brian was giving feedback on processes he barely understood, I was already compiling the file. Every altered doc Brian saved. Every access timestamp Lucas accidentally edited. Every joke made in a language they assumed I couldn't hear. They thought I was being quiet because I was scared. I was quiet because I was building something. Something slow. Something cold. And something irreversible. By the third week, Lucas had stopped pretending. He no longer masked his micromanagement behind mentorship. He skipped pleasantries, stopped asking how I was doing, and started doing what men like him always do when they sense a woman's spine straightening. He got louder, bolder, and careless. "Let's just move faster," he snapped during one morning meeting, waving his hand as if my presentation had personally insulted him. Ashley's methods are thorough, sure, but we don't need gold-plated compliance. We need agility. Brian nodded like a bobblehead. Exactly. We could probably cut out half the approval flow without risk. I blinked. Without risk? Brian opened his mouth to reply, but Lucas cut in. Ashley, we appreciate your legacy processes, but we're modernizing. Brian's been talking to a few tech partners who could streamline the whole thing. I looked at him, then at Brian. Then I said the most dangerous sentence I could muster, calm and clipped. If you'd like to restructure payroll compliance without understanding it, you'll need to speak with legal. Lucas smirked, eyes narrowing. We'll loop them in when we're ready. That was the final clue. They weren't just planning to replace me. They were planning to break what I built, repackage it, and slap their names on the box. And worse, they didn't even understand how much damage that would do. They thought payroll was just numbers. They didn't see the regulatory landmines, the cross-border tax complications, the delicate timing of payments across jurisdictions. You screw it up once, you don't get a memo, you get an audit. But they weren't going to wait for that. They were going to fake stability until the next quarterly review. So I gave them exactly what they wanted. I started sending Brian training decks labeled things like streamlined approval pathways, version 3, and optimized audit exemptions. On the surface, they looked legitimate, clean, sleek. Inside, they were poison. Because every example I gave, every sample file and diagram was built on outdated rules, loopholes we'd patched years ago, test cases that never made it past legal, and just enough real data to look convincing. Brian ate it up like candy. Wow, this is so much cleaner than what I've been reading in the docs, he messaged one afternoon. Why didn't we implement this sooner? Because we didn't want to get sued, Brian. But I didn't say that. I just replied, some things take time. Meanwhile, Lucas kept circling like a vulture, pretending to be a visionary. He started pitching a cost-neutral revamp of payroll to the executive team. Called it Project Phoenix. Sent out a teaser deck at the end of the week with buzzwords like resilient, lean forward, and digitally harmonized. I almost gagged. He even added a testimonial quote on slide 9. The new system eliminates redundancy while improving clarity. Ashley T., Senior, Payroll Compliance Manager. My quote. Except I never said that. He pulled it from an email I wrote 2 years ago about something entirely different. I screenshotted it, added it to the folder labeled Fabrications. By then, the file had over 130 items. Slack threads, backdated approvals, screenshots of Brian editing permissions he didn't have, emails Lucas sent to third-party contractors requesting sample automation tools that would bypass our existing checks entirely. But the real nail came on a Thursday. Brian sent a file to legal, without me. A reconciliation report for a vendor contract. He copied Lucas. The email read, per Ashley's recent changes to the vendor flow, this should now qualify under auto-approve. Only I hadn't changed anything. And I hadn't spoken to Brian that day. I opened the file. He'd manually adjusted the approval threshold, lowered it by 40%. The vendor in question? A known red flag we'd frozen last quarter. I felt my hands tighten around the mouse. Slowly, deliberately, I started pulling metadata. Brian hadn't just sent a bad file. He'd used my template, my formatting, and he'd listed me as the source. Lucas knew. He was setting me up to take the fall for whatever shortcuts they were planning. So I made a decision. I crafted a message in Mandarin. Formal, measured. The kind of language that doesn't just translate. It slices. Mr. Zhang, I've identified several changes being attributed to my office without authorization. I've attached samples for your review. These documents have not gone through proper compliance, and I'm concerned they may be escalated as final. No accusations, no drama. Just a quiet knock on the right door. He responded 12 minutes later. Understood. Please continue documenting. We'll review internally. And that was it. No follow-ups, no requests, just a single green light. But I knew what it meant. Because when silence comes from the top, it's not indifference. It's strategy. By the start of the next week, the office felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just tense. The kind of tense where people start saying good morning a little too quickly. Where Slack pings slow down. Where eyes dart, but no one asks questions. Lucas didn't know yet. But Mr. Zhang had started watching. And I had begun tightening the noose. It started small. I filed a request with IT for an access audit. Just routine, I said. Quarterly check. Nobody questioned it, because I was the one who normally handled those. Within 24 hours, I had a report detailing who accessed which files and when. Brian had been inside the payroll sandbox 3 times in the past week. One of those times? He used an admin override that only 2 people had, me and Lucas, except I'd revoked my own override 6 months ago after the last audit. Lucas didn't know that. So how did Brian get in? Answer. Lucas gave him his credentials. Now, in a healthy company, that alone would trigger a security review. But Lucas ran the department like his own little kingdom. So I did what I always did. I documented. Then I uploaded the report into the growing dossier labeled Phoenix Fraud. I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted everything traceable. Because the truth is, men like Lucas don't fall because they mess up. They fall when everyone sees it at the same time. So I prepared the moment. I organized every false email, altered approval, and fake attribution into a master folder. I cross-referenced each with our compliance policies. Then I translated the entire thing into Mandarin, twice. Once in business formal for Mr. Zhang, once in legal formality for Tokyo HQ. I added a single note in both versions. Please review. Discrepancies between actual policy and implementation may lead to reputational risk if left unaddressed. I didn't sign it emotionally. I didn't ask for help. I just presented truth. Clean, sharp, and weaponized. And I sent it. Not directly to Lucas, not to legal, but to Mayu, Mr. Zhang's personal assistant. The same Mayu who used to sit in our board meetings with a calm smile and a sharper mind than all of us combined. She was quiet, almost invisible, until you realized she was the one whispering in the CEO's ear before every decision. I hadn't seen her in person in over a year, but I still had her contact. She replied the next morning with only 2 words. I see. That was all I needed. The real shift came Thursday afternoon during a team meeting where Lucas introduced new operational efficiencies. He walked in late, of course, holding a smoothie he never drank, wearing that smug expression like he just closed a deal with NASA. We're going to streamline the approval process, he said, nodding toward Brian. We've been testing a prototype flow, thanks to Brian's great work, and we'll begin implementation next quarter. No mention of me. No mention that the prototype was built using fake compliance files and bypassed controls. He clicked through the slides like he was auditioning for a keynote, all graphs and jargon, ending with a bullet point that read, Ashley will transition to an advisory role for knowledge retention. Knowledge retention? Like I was a bookshelf. I sat still, face unreadable. Then Brian jumped in. Also, we've already rolled out most of the changes Ashley outlined in her earlier notes, so it should be a smooth handoff. Except I'd outlined none of that. Lucas looked at me. Ashley, you've been a great support in this transition. We're grateful for your adaptability. Adaptability. A sanitized way of saying, thanks for training your replacement. Now go quietly. I smiled. Happy to contribute. Let me know when you're ready for the formal transition memo. He nodded, clueless. What he didn't know? That memo had already been sent, just not to him. Because 2 hours before that meeting, an email went out from Tokyo HQ, not internally, externally, to our audit partners, to legal, to the board. Subject line, compliance irregularities under review, payroll department attached were 3 files. 1, an access audit with unauthorized admin overrides. 2nd, a reconciliation report showing altered thresholds. 3rd, an attribution map showing my name attached to documents I never touched. Each file translated, timestamped, verified. And underneath it all, a line that read, submitted by Ashley T., Senior Compliance Officer for urgent review. Fluency in Mandarin certified. Cross-reference recommended. The trap was sprung, but I wasn't done, because traps don't just expose, they humiliate. I had one more move. The meeting invite came late Sunday night. Subject, payroll review and organizational realignment, mandatory attendance. No agenda, no details, just a Zoom link and 2 names attached in the sender field. Mr. Zhang, Mayu Tanaka. I didn't reply. I just read it twice and smiled. By Monday morning, the entire department was vibrating with silent dread. Lucas walked in with his usual swagger, but his smile was too tight, his shirt too crisp. I could smell the cologne from across the room. The same one he only used for board meetings or when he knew he was about to be cornered and wanted to mask the sweat. Brian wasn't bouncing anymore either, just sitting hunched over his laptop like he was trying to solve world hunger in Excel. I didn't say a word to either of them. At 10:01 a.m., the call started. Mr. Zhang appeared first. Calm, composed, unreadable. Then Mayu joined, perfect as always. Navy blazer, no background filter, no small talk. Lucas started speaking immediately, voice a touch too loud. Thank you for making the time. Just wanted to align with Tokyo on the changes we've been implementing in payroll, especially under the new Phoenix structure. He smiled, gestured toward Brian on the screen. Brian's done incredible work and we're eager to show our progress. He launched a screen share before anyone asked. Clicked through slides like a magician forcing a card. diagrams, quotes, bullet points. A chart he'd labeled Ashley T's legacy structure next to one titled Phoenix Flow, Future State. He even added a thank you slide at the end. None of this would have been possible without Ashley's foundational efforts. We're proud of the transition. My jaw didn't move. Mayu leaned forward. Before we proceed, she said softly, I'd like to address a concern. Lucas blinked. Sure, of course. Mayu pulled up her own screen. File, Phoenix Fraud Full Zip. I recognized it immediately. Every file I'd compiled, every screenshot, every translation, every forged memo, every fabricated quote with my name on it. But she didn't explain it. She let the silence do it for her. Click. She opened the access audit. Click. The altered thresholds. Click. The email from Brian with the words, per Ashley's recent changes. She zoomed in on the timestamp, the metadata, the revision log. Lucas cleared his throat. I think there's been a misunderstanding. That document wasn't finalized. Brian must have used a draft. The draft was distributed to legal, Mayu said, and to your third-party vendor, as confirmation of compliance. Are you suggesting that was accidental? Lucas stammered. Brian was pale, eyes darting like he was looking for the eject button. Mr. Zhang finally spoke. We were unaware Ashley was being transitioned. She is fluent in Mandarin, correct? Lucas blinked. Yes, I believe she studied in China for 5 years, holds a certification in regulatory Mandarin. Did you know that? Lucas opened his mouth, closed it. Mayu continued, still calm. Several of the documents in your Phoenix proposal use Ashley's name. We've confirmed those attributions are false. She did not draft, approve, or review those files. The translations used were pulled from legacy documents and modified using her archived templates. Lucas looked at Brian. Brian spoke up, voice shaking. Lucas told me to use the format. I thought she approved it. You forged her approval, Mayu said. Then she turned to me. Ashley, do you have anything to add? I looked straight at the camera. Just one thing. I pulled up my own file. Phoenix Deck, original.pptx slide 6. The quote, the new system eliminates redundancy while improving clarity. Ashley T. I clicked the revision log, showed my email. The actual line? Removing compliance steps for speed is like skipping parachute checks to save time. Might work, until it doesn't. Silence. Lucas deflated in real time, like watching a parade balloon pop in slow motion. Mr. Zhang turned off his camera for a moment, then returned. Effective immediately, Lucas R. is placed on administrative leave. An external audit will follow. Brian's internship is concluded. Ashley. He paused. You will now report directly to Tokyo. Title, Director of Global Payroll Compliance. My inbox dinged. New contract. Signed by Mr. Zhang himself. I nodded once, still not smiling. Because this wasn't a happy ending. It was justice. Lucas tried a final Hail Mary. I was just trying to modernize. Make things leaner. I didn't know she was watching every step. I cut him off. I wasn't watching. I was listening. You just never thought I understood you. And then in Mandarin, I said, you thought I didn't understand. I remembered every single word. Mayu nodded slightly, and Mr. Zhang smiled for the first time that morning. Meeting adjourned, he said. Click. Call ended. Lucas sat motionless. Brian looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. I gathered my things. No speech, no strut, just calm. Fluent, quiet power. Because revenge doesn't always scream. Sometimes it speaks in perfect Mandarin.